Hello, my name is Colson Rivers. I hope you all are doing well today. I'm so glad you could join us, and hopefully you'll learn something here. I'm here to talk to you about anger in the workplace, developing skills to communicate effectively. I recently took a course on conflict resolution, and we had an anger management module. So I'm hoping to share some of the insights from that module here with you today. First thing I want us to do is kind of brainstorm what anger is, especially and how we've experienced that in the workplace. So if you've ever, I want you to think back to some experiences you've had, maybe a boss being angry at a subordinate, or a subordinate being angry at a boss, or if it was just a peer-to-peer interaction. I want you to consider those for a moment. Okay, so now that you've taken some time to think about those, what I want you to do is, if you're in a group watching with us, I want you to pause this video and discuss those interactions that you had and the experiences that you've had, maybe what caused them, and see what you can learn about each other. Okay, so now that you've taken some time to brainstorm and discuss those things, I want to talk to you about a couple different points. First, that when most people think of anger in the workplace, they think of noticeable acts of anger expression, such as yelling or throwing or slamming objects or storming off in a fit of rage. But what's important to know is that many individuals manage their anger in different ways. And just because your anger is hidden does not mean that it is healthy. And that's something that we're going to talk about more later. And finally, anger is a common emotion that needs to be handled rightly for every individual to create an optimal and effective work environment. And so anger being a common emotion means that it's something that does happens to each and every one of us, and we need to know how to handle that rightly. As the same as conflict being inevitable in the workplace, so is anger, and therefore we need to be able to handle it well. So first, let's talk about what I want you all to gain out of this experience. And so training objective. Your training objective, what I want you to learn, the goal of our time here together, is at the end of the training session, trainees will be able to properly identify and respond to the different styles of anger expression, namely anger in, anger out, and anger controlled. Now, if that doesn't make sense, we're going to go through these one by one together to make sure it is crystal clear. But first, let's talk about what anger is. So, according to Kahn, an academic textbook author, anger is a strong sense of displeasure, a synonym for antagonism and rage. And rage, you might be thinking, is a strong word, but it is a close relative to anger, and therefore we need to associate it in the same conversation. And from Fisher, who's a psychology journal author, writes, anger can be seen as a means of trying to get something done by forcing a change in the target's behavior, especially when one feels that one has power or control over the target. And this is introducing kind of a power or control dynamic in anger, that we use it as a tool over someone else to get a certain need or want that we have. Continuing from Kahn, anger is different from feeling hurt or irritated. We experience these other emotions when someone or something frustrates our desires, but anger carries with it something more. It carries with it the desire to get even or to seek revenge. So frustration or irritation or being hurt or irritated is merely someone frustrating or preventing something that we want. So if I wanted to go enjoy my nice cup of coffee and someone spilled it over, that might irritate me if they did it on accident, but that's not something that I need to go spill their coffee to get in that anger or that revenge. Likewise, if somebody says something harmful to me or did something that hurt me, that doesn't necessitate anger, but it might, and therefore that's something that we're going to talk about. So let's talk about what causes anger. So some individuals have traits that predispose them to experience anger more frequently, intensely, or for longer periods of time. And so, we're talking about like an angry person. What does that really mean in practice? And so that's these things. That when that angry person, this person that's predisposed to expressive and anger, that means that they get angry more frequently, and when they get angry, they're angry more intensely, and they're also angry for a longer period of time. And this is a coming from an academic journal from Parrott and others about anger and different types of anger felt within individuals. But there's also a growing belief that anger is always has a deeper cause. In other words, the anger is a secondary emotion, that there is a more primary emotion, such as insecurity or fear or vulnerability, that leads to, when those things are interfered with or touched or agitated, that leads to fear. So, coming from Rosenberg, an author of a book about communication theory, at the core of all anger is a need that is not being fulfilled. Again, that primary desire or need or fulfillment that is not being met or being damaged or threatened, that is what leads to anger, according to Rosenberg. And viewing anger as a secondary emotion requires a couple things. It requires us to be vulnerable, because we have to talk about our fears and our vulnerabilities. Just as Khan says here, anger protects us. That's putting up the walls, that's putting out the defenses. But viewing anger as a secondary emotion requires us to admit our fears and vulnerabilities that will make us vulnerable in an effort to get through and manage our anger better. Talking about anger management, what is it? So, anger management is simply how a person manages their anger. And this is a neutral term. I think it often brings the connotation of being sent to anger management for being overly expressive with anger. But it is in itself a neutral term. Like I said earlier, just because your anger is hidden doesn't mean that's healthy. It might be less destructive in the short term, but as we're going to talk about here in a minute, might not be as healthy as you might think. And continuing on, effective anger management requires honesty. It requires us to be honest that we have anger, because we can't manage something that we deny exists. So I'd say, oh, I'm not an angry person. I've never yelled at anyone. But you might just be one of these other anger management styles that isn't as expressive as others. And therefore, we need to be honest with ourselves that we do get angry. Additionally, we need to know what style we already have, kind of like what I was hinting at earlier, is that we need to be honest about how we do handle anger when we feel that. And so now talking about that, we're going to talk about our different types of anger management. So first is what's called anger in. And so this is a group of people that do not express their anger to the person who upset them. That's the definition coming from Khan here. Another characteristic of these anger ins is they avoid and accommodate to an unhealthy extent. And so instead of asserting, what is wrong, what has hurt them or has caused their anger, has upset them, they want to avoid that. They want to accommodate for that person, to pretend like everything's fine. And what that does, that bottles up that emotion, that actually feeds that, that growing bitterness within that person, that builds this pile of anger inside. And so, some people might say, oh, I just need to vent, I just need to let all this anger out. But we need to be careful here when we talk about venting, especially with anger ins. Often what an anger in is doing when they vent is that they are rehashing everything that caused them anger. And then at that point, there's a couple different options they have. Either all this rehashing makes them more angry than they ever were before, causing them to validate and justify their emotions of anger and bitterness towards that person that upset them, or it could cause them to have a better understanding of who upset them and why they upset them, and why that person did what they did. So it can be done, but it needs to be done very carefully, and often for anger ins can lead just to more anger. And anger outs are probably what people think about most immediately when we talk about anger, as people that are quick to express anger vocally or physically. People that are throwing the tables, slamming the doors. That's your anger outs. We've all met one. We all know it when we see it. One note that I do want to make here is that men and women are equally likely to be anger outs, according to Tarvis, as well as anger ins. This goes both ways. I think the stereotype would be women are anger ins, men are anger outs. But according to studies, it really does go both ways on a very equal level. And so we need to be mindful of that and understanding of that as well. And finally, anger controlled. The big difference here is that people can choose to be anger controllers. That anger in and anger out is typically something, a coping mechanism or a defense mechanism, or a way that we manage our anger that has been brought about through our experiences or our childhoods, whatever that might be. But the difference is that anger control is something that can be grown and that can be improved upon, that is a goal that we can work towards. And so what even does that mean? So according from Kahn here, anger controllers are people, assertive individuals, who do not let their feelings control how they respond in conflict situations. And so let's kind of break that down a little bit. Assertive versus aggression. So assertive is being able to be calm but firm in what I need or want in a given situation. And this is not dominated by my feelings or my emotions, but rather I'm in control of those things as I approach this conflict situation. That's something that I have stopped, I have thought about this, and as I approach this conflict situation. As opposed to an aggressive individual, which is kind of more in line with an anger out, who, knows what they want, but they have not, their feelings and emotions, they are at the wheel. And so that's something that we need to be on the lookout for. And so first I want us to consider the climate of our work environment. And so we're going to do that by doing exercise 1 on page 7 of your participant manuals. The purpose of this, like I said, is to consider your current workplace climate attitude toward anger management styles. So, is your workplace a place that's welcoming to anger ins over anger outs? Most would be pretty welcoming of anger controllers. And so I want you to take a minute to do that exercise. So pause the video right now. Okay, now you've had some time to fill out that exercise. Hopefully, maybe you're taking this with a group. I'm going to ask you to pause it yet again and discuss what those answers were and maybe why you gave them. So, for example, if you said strongly disagree on question 8, I want you to explain to the group why you said strongly disagree. So again, pause the video right here. Okay, now that you've hopefully had some time to discuss with your group members, or maybe just contemplate if you're sitting by yourself, I'm going to talk about the applications of anger management. So firstly, looking at others first, I want you to be able to seek to understand others without stereotyping. So maybe understand, okay, that person is an anger in, so maybe I need to help them be able to vent in an effective way, a beneficial way, and not in a way that's rehashing and causing further angering. Or maybe I need to encourage them to actually confront this person in a healthy, non-aggressive, but an assertive way, where they are calm but firm, knowing what they want and need. And so consider the anger management types of those around you and how you could better understand them in light of what we have learned today. Turning to the self, I want you to seek to understand yourself and the areas that you need to improve. One of the best ways that I found to do this is to ask trusted individuals for honest feedback on your anger management. Go to a close friend and say, hey, can you think of a time that I was angry, and what did that look like? Do you think I handled that well? And really gather that feedback. Don't get defensive, and maybe seek that out from a few different people, and really evaluate yourself and where you stand now. And as a final encouragement to you, dealing with anger requires first that we build habits of positive responses to anger-provoking situations. That's again from Kahn. And the point that he's getting at here is that changing your anger management from an anger in or an anger out to more of an anger controller is a slow but steady change. That we do this by building these habits, one on top of each other, of positive response to these anger situations. That when someone spills my coffee, when someone doesn't refill the paper in the copier, that I'm building positive responses. That my first assumption is not the worst, but maybe that person was really busy or didn't notice, something like that. That we're kind of building these positive responses to these anger-provoking situations, allowing us to stop and think and contemplate why we're angry, not letting our emotions take the wheel. And again, that is a slow but steady process. So do keep at it, and do not be discouraged if you feel like you're not winning this battle. Continuing on to exercise 2, which is on page 9 and 10 of your participant manual. I want you to, the purpose of the exercise is to identify your own anger management style. If you don't have time to do this right now, you can feel free to do this later on. And if you are able to do it now and you're in a group, please pause the video here to discuss your results with one another. Okay, so finally, if you have any questions or if you want more resources on this topic, please contact us through our website or email, or drop it in the comment section below. I hope you have, I just want to thank you so much for your guys' time. I hope you've learned from this training session how to identify and respond to the different styles of anger expression, namely anger in, anger out, and anger controlled, and do so in an effective and productive way. And finally, here are our resources here that went into this presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Signing off. Bye.